So welcome you back. We are just about to start the second part of this afternoon's forum. The second panel is entitled very simply, Photography as an Original. A discussion about which we can keep on forever, I guess. The first speaker of this panel is Robert Silverio, who is a photographer, teacher, and writer. Robert Silverio is based, as most of you know, in Prague, and his main field of activity is the interpretation and analysis of the photographic image in the 20th century. At present, he is the head of the Department of Photography in the Film and TV School of Academy of Performing Arts in Prague, FAMU, where he lectures in the history and theory of photography. He has published extensively on the subject, and his books include Postmodern Photography, published in year 2007, possibly. So let us just have a little bit patience, because it seems that, oh, okay. And the title of Robert's talk is The Media of Photography.
No, it's not.
It's not.
It's not. It's photography's media, which is non-grammatical form, of course, because photography doesn't have plural in English. So the theme or the title of the lecture is Photography's media, media in plural. Just let me. All right. Děkuju. Let's start, and I will try to explain the problem of original and copy, vintage prints, etc. on several examples. This is the fragment of the text with which this event was announced on web. So it's there in Czech, it's there in English. I tried to be serious. So because there were questions in this fragment of the text announcing this panel discussion, so I decided to answer the questions which were there in the fragment. And so the voices of traditional collectors can be heard. They value authors' original vintage prints with their manual craftsmanship. They claim that with digital products, this term has already lost its meaning. Are they right or not? Is it even important to be dealing with this? Is the virtual version of photography a danger to the survival of photography as a collector's and exhibitions artifact? So basically here we have three questions, and indeed they are key questions. So I tried to answer them. So the voices of traditional collectors can be heard. They value authors' original vintage prints with their manual craftsmanship. They claim that with digital products, this term has already lost its meaning. Are they right? No, they are not. It's even important to be dealing with this? Yes, it is. Is it a virtual version of photography a danger to the survival of photography as a collector and exhibition artifact? No, it's not. So to answer the first question, are they right? No, they are not, because there's nothing like digital product. We have digital data, but we don't have digital product. We have always a photograph if we have a product which is printed. And it doesn't matter really if it's printed from digital data or from analog, from negative. In the past 20 years, the philosophers tried to stress so much the differences between new digital media and the old analog media photography that they overlooked basically one thing, and that is that they are in some aspects similar. The similarity is that the original negative or data are the same in the sense that they can be lost easily. Negatives get lost unless you are dealing with photography whose archive is very well put in order. So you simply lost negatives. And that data, of course, are lost or corrupted, and you cannot open them. So in this way, digital and analog photography is very, very similar. And what remains, if something remains, is the print and or prints. The problem is that we have inherited vocabulary dealing with photography, which is a little bit old. So we are dealing with things like original, copy, reproduction, which are basically inherited from older media, and which are not quite good or quite suitable. All right. Basically, what I want to say is that photographs taken by amateurs and printed in darkroom or lab or home printers are completely different from a medium, from a photograph published in printed media. It's so different that we should not use the same word for it at all. So that's the reason why I was speaking about photography's media, not about medium of photography, but photography's media. Quite different media, not one. I believe it's the same as if we have oral discussion and printed book, and if we call both just simply language, it would be wrong. But we do that with photography. We have a snap, an image we can take out of pocket or wallet, and we call it photo. Then we see image in newspaper, and we call it photo. Well, that's obviously wrong. Mimochodem, já nehlídám čas. Jak dlouho mluvím?
5 minutes. She is in charge of controlling.
I have already spoken for 6.5 minutes, so I have 10 minutes, so basically I have 3.5 minutes to finish the speech. All right. If we should speak about photography and of some kinds, and about copy and vintage prints and reproductions, then there is one very important term. The term is only too notorious, Walter Benjamin, aura. I know it's too notorious, but still I'm afraid that I cannot avoid speaking about aura, because that's something which is connected with originality. In Walter Benjamin's theory, aura is something that connects you, or to be precise, it's a texture that connects you with or through time and space, however long away the thing speaks about or it shows can be. And according to Benjamin, the photography or reproduction techniques in general, they are killing aura, because they make object not unique. Unique object doesn't exist anymore in art, and so thus photography and reproduction kills aura. Well, of course, aura is not a proper term. It's not proper terminology, and there are very confused ideas even in Benjamin himself, his work. So it's a feeling, it's emotion, but I believe it's an emotion that we share, and at least many of us, when we see old image. Yes, we feel this kind of space-time relationship which takes us to other place or back to the past. So it's a kind of sentimental feeling. And of course, yes, it's killed by reproduction. There is one thing which can be connected to aura or compared with aura, and that's fetish. Because fetish is also something that stands for something that is not here. So a photograph can become a fetish, as well as stalking, as well as something else. Of course, fetish can be sexual, it can be a religious fetish, but again, it's something that this is here, and stands for something which is not here. So it's interesting to stress that fetish has a very aura-like character. Teď přeskočíme asi tak 20 slajdů a podíváme se na tabulku, co bude. Ano, tady. It's a very primitive table which I made just before this lecture, and there are of course, but for our end it will do. It will take me to 2 points, to fetish aura, and at the same time to stress that there is not medium of photography, but photographies media. So to simplify it maximum, I changed, or I made 4 categories: private photos, fine art photography, which is connected with vintage prints, public photos in printed media, web public images in web. And basically, that's interesting. They are all called photography. They are very, very different because they deal with different target group. As you can see, the ways of communication are completely different, and of course they change the meaning, because we know that the way how an image is communicated changes the meaning, and it have different qualities. Beside others, it has quality which we can call fetish or aura. And I basically argue that basically every photograph, even printed one in thousands, or in book, in newspaper, in magazine, can have aura if it is unique. What do I mean by this? I mean it that even if you have a magazine which is 1 million copies, then most of the copies are lost, and you cannot find them, you can reach them. But you can have 1 copy left at your, in an old box which was left after your grandfathers, and then you can touch it, and it's different era, and it's individualized, in fact, because it has even different spots and different mold, perhaps. So it's individual copy, and of course it has already this kind of aura. The only kind of photography that cannot have aura is that one which is not printed. Because once it's printed, it becomes a 3-dimensional object. We forget that photography has 3 dimensions if it's printed. It's not just something flat. It has also, it's on the paper or plastic or something similar, but that makes it an object, and that's the reason why we can have it like a fetish. We need object, not something abstract, to have a fetish. And this is something different with web and images in the web. And it doesn't matter whether it's about politics, about killing and some war, or about private pictures which people put on Facebook and Twitter. So they are different in the sense that they are not printed, they are abstract, and they cannot become fetish, they cannot become aura. They can be lost, and nothing remains, of course. Therefore, I would like to, again, individualize this kind of visual branch, web, public images, is something completely different. Next slide, please. Yeah, I wrote it so that you can remember it. Let's go here to this picture, to to this, which is by Korda, and it's a picture of Che Guevara, and it's allegedly the most printed picture in the world. Of course, not as a picture, not as a photograph, but on the T-shirts it's used and appropriated in art, etc., etc., etc. So that's the most printed picture. But at the same time, if for example the T-shirt remains as the only one, of course it had then an auratic quality. So aura is a kind of survival. Or there might be, of course, killing. And so, for example, if you are a fine art, if you are artist using photography, then editioning, make 2 copies or 3 copies, it's basically artificially created aura. Aura made for economic reasons. Of course, the images play in, or they have double lives, and here I would like to stop. Next slide, please. Sorry, yeah, in fact, I was speaking about a T-shirt or something like that, any of these objects which, if is left alone as the only one, it has auratic qualities. So aura is not stable. It's something that evolves, that is being created intentionally or unintentionally. Další obrázek. And here 2 last images. Of course, everybody in the audience knows this picture from 1827 or 1826. We know it from the textbook on history of photography and from serious books on history of photography. And we all know this picture. But in fact, because it's reprinted from book to book, this is how it looks. Next picture. This is how it looks, approximately, of course, in original. This is picture taken in Getty Research Center when it was being restored by Dušan Stulík. Again, I would say that basically we don't have 1 picture, but 2 pictures. One is original, and then, of course, there is another photography picture which travels through history textbooks, and this was the previous one, of course, and that we all know. Poslední. Yeah, comparison. Tak ještě jeden, poslední. Dobrá. There should have been 1 more slide, which was not there. And it was advertisement because Jaroslav Anděl, or I had a chance to cooperate with Jaroslav Anděl on the book he wrote on history of thinking of photography, and což je strana toho, which is Myšlení o fotografii, and it's a book which was just launched on the market, and it covers various aspects of how photography was considered. And I mention it here not only as an advertisement, but also because it covers completely different approach of photography, how it can be seen, and it stresses I was trying to communicate, and that means that basically there is not photography but photographies. Thank you for attention.
I don't know. Veronica counted the minutes. I think it was okay. Thank you, Robert. And the next speaker, the next panelist is Natasha Egan. Natasha actually came from far away. Natasha is based in Chicago. She's the director of the Museum of Contemporary Photography at Columbia College in Chicago, where she has organized dozens of international and national exhibitions and contributed essays to numerous publications and magazines. To the Museum of Contemporary Photography has a permanent collection of over 12,000 photographic artifacts dating from early 20th century until today, and hosts innovative exhibitions, public programs, and educational activities. In addition, Natasha teaches at the Photography and Humanities Department at Columbia College in Chicago and serves on the juries of many international exhibitions. And the title of Natasha's talk is Jan Tichy works with the Museum of Contemporary Photography collection.
Thank you. Actually, you missed the beginning of the title, which is 1979:1.
Oh, sorry. Yes, I missed the numbers.
2012:23, which I will explain. Actually, the timing of this was quite interesting coming after Robert's discussion because we have a collection of objects at the Museum of Contemporary Photography, about 12,000 objects, mostly from the 1930s forward. And as all collections, they are formed with very different reasons. Who's involved, who starts it, who funds it, subjective, who the curator is, who the director is. So every collection is unique. Our collection, we asked a Czech artist, Jan Tichy, who is from the Czech Republic, moved to Israel, and then from Israel to Chicago, and is now living in Chicago. We asked him to work with our collection, commissioned him for 1 year, to do anything he wanted with the collection. We said, if you want to use one photograph, that's fine. He's known as sort of a light installation artist. So we didn't know what the results were. But he interviewed the staff, and we all said, oh, our collection is so accessible because it's all online. We have every object digitized. And so he thought, the staff was so proud of our accessibility, but when he tried to access it, he sort of thought, it's not very accessible unless you are a registrar. It's not fun, it's not engaging. And he pushed us to really think about the digital representation of our objects and how they could be used and how the museum's objects could be translated beyond the walls of the museum. So he worked with a group of students for 1 year, graduate students around around Chicago, 4 different universities. And they picked apart our collection and its accessibility, and we're ready to relaunch a new website that was supposed to be out now, but it's a couple weeks delayed. But I hope that you each will look at the new website when it comes out. It's mocp.org. We will blast out an announcement. But one of the projects that he did is he invited 7 or 5 curators. Actually, I should just go ahead. He invited 5 curators, one of whom's in this room and just spoke, Carl, to look through the collection and organize digital exhibitions from the collection. Everybody was remote. Nobody came and physically looked at the collection, but he created these, asked these different curators to organize the exhibitions. He also had 6 of the students also organize exhibitions from the collection. So before we even get into the objects, he was most interested in the online accessibility of the collection. We were able to launch these digital exhibitions most recently in September at the Chicago Art Fair, Art Expo, where we highlighted the digital exhibitions on monitors in the booth, and it was very well received, and a bit of a conceptual. We have a conceptual way of looking at the photographs as a whole. We didn't have long text that went with them. It was just a visual experience of seeing this work. We did have an explanation of the project. These digital exhibitions are currently on the corner of the museum's building. That's another issue that we're working towards. The museum is in a wonderful location in the heart of Chicago, yet we're hidden within an academic building because we're part of Columbia College. So we're working towards revamping the entire museum. But one of the ways to also unveil what's inside was to highlight these digital collections on the outside of the building. So all night and all day, the digital exhibitions that are up right now are circling through these monitors on Michigan Avenue and Harrison. Michigan is one of the major streets of Chicago. On the inside of our space, we just opened last week Jan Tiki's exhibition of him working with the collection. So the digital part of the project will continue for a year. We're asking many different people, different types of people, artists, educators, people not at all involved in photography to organize these exhibitions, and that will continue. On the inside, we have Jan Tiki's work of working with the collection, and he really interprets the collection in many different ways, and I'll quickly take you through the exhibition. This first room is what we're considering almost the dark room of the exhibition. It's a room where he took Aaron Siskin's photographs, mostly of graffiti on walls, and as well as another very well-known series of Aaron Siskin's that he photographed when he was at the Institute of Design in Chicago, of people jumping off of into Lake Michigan, and all you have are these abstractions. So he's taken this as a projection in the room above where you have these very dark video work. I'm going to go to the next slide because it shows it a little bit clearer in the space, where he has a dual projection of the wall pieces where he removed from Aaron Siskin's work in our collection, he removed all the gray tones out of the piece, and it's a time-based piece where very slowly it starts off very dark, and it very slowly becomes lighter. This is just, and lighter, until the room becomes quite bright. And it lights these two Aaron Siskin photographs from the collection that are also in that space. On the other side of the wall is what we're considering the results of the photograph. So we have what we consider the dark room on one side of the space, and then photographs from the collection in the other side of the space, where we're very interested in the object itself. So what he did was he looked at what is this collection about. So he titled the show 1979:1, which is the photograph of the person being punched. It's the accession number. We acquired, this is the first piece brought into the collection in 1971, and it's paired with the very last piece brought into the collection, which is titled 2012-21, I apologize. So he went through the collection with very database. What's the first piece in the collection? What's the most recent piece in the collection? What's the earliest made piece in the collection? And what's the newest made, physically, piece in the collection? I'm also showing you 2 slides to go back to the point that Robert was bringing up about these being the actual objects and these being the objects of how they're represented on our database for the image. So, but I always want to show what the object looks like in the physical space. So he pairs some of the works together in the collection with very concrete. This is the largest photograph in the collection with the smallest photograph in the collection. The largest photograph is Camera Obscura by Shigu Rei, a Chinese artist, and the smallest one is a Walker Evans, a very small contact print. And I love these 2 pieces together because the picture of Shigu Rei's is of Shanghai, of a very large city that's exploded and was built in only the last 20 years. Well, there's this detail of Walker Evans of like a city grate. And I love this idea that the smallest and the largest work so beautifully together in this series when it was taken at random as just physically what is the smallest piece in the collection with the largest, and yet they tie together really beautifully. From there, he creates pairs that are, some of them a bit more metaphorical. He wants to talk about photography being something that we can explore. There's the data, like I just explained. This is the largest, this is the smallest. And then there's the emotional that goes with it, and how subjective that is. This one is one more piece, one more pairing of a photographer. Many of you must recognize the Robert Frank image of the Americans. When the Museum of Contemporary Photography was originally established, it's changed, the mission has changed a bit since then. It was in 1979 with the first collection piece. We benchmarked the collection on, from 1959, collecting work from Robert Frank's The American Project. We've now since gone back, but originally, so Robert Frank has an important connection to our collection. And so Jantiki has pulled a Robert Frank image with an image that we found in the collection. We have no idea how it got there, who it is, or anything about it. And so we have, but as you approach this, this pairing, some people would probably recognize Robert Frank, but there's like an equal weight to the pictures, and you don't have this idea of judging by the titles. We chose not to put any titles in this entire exhibition. There is a booklet that you can carry around for when you're desperate for the titles, but we wanted people to experience the pairs, make their own connections, bring their own experience to these pairs, that he brought his own experience. So this is another pairing that he created. When he's teaching, he always uses this term, which maybe he learned from his own teaching, is he said, as teaching art, the goal of teaching art is to make 1 + 1 = 3. And so that's his answer to this pairing, is he has 2 objects, but it makes 3 people. And it's a way of just going into this exploration of always, what can you do more than beyond the 1 + 1, getting to the answer to beyond, to number 3. This is Diane Arbus and Rita Kadisha. He had quite a few pairings. We have quite a bit of Czech photography in our collection, which I can explain, of how it got there. But I don't have enough time. But he discovered that we had quite a bit of Czech photography in our collection, and so he pairs these 2 photographs together for perhaps very formal reasons, but also for his own connection, that he's in a city, he's building his own career and his own artistic life, and this is a very well-known photograph of the Marina City Towers being built, which are in Chicago. And he pairs it with an abstraction of a Czech photographer. This is perhaps a formal connection, but he doesn't give you that answer. He also took our entire collection, the digital collection, I should say, and puts it into a rapid-fire video where in 7 minutes you see all 12,000 objects in the collection. It's about, the question was, what is the luminosity of the collection? So it goes from darkest picture to lightest, and it goes so quickly. You recognize an image, and then it disappears, and a new image is covering your mind. It goes so quickly. It's really, I wish I had the video here to show, but I just have a still from it. And this video room lights, as it gets lighter, it lights the darkest picture in our collection against the lightest picture in our collection. But you can hardly see the darkest one when it's in the beginning stages. So this is across the wall opposing the video. Again, here's the digital reproduction of that, which you can see much clearer. Rodigerava's photograph, that's almost impossible to see in the video space. Unless you really wait it out until that moment when it's light enough to catch the glimpse of it. Next to Harry Callahan's Eleanor, of his wife's behind side. He also asked the staff. Many of the staff have worked at the museum for a very long time. Many of us for almost 15 years. And he asked the staff, what are some of your pictures? Which, of course, is a very subjective question as well. We all bring our own experiences to how we built this collection. And we all pulled, some of us pulled 30, 40 images that we just responded to. And then he looked at the image list, and with getting to know us over the year, also then pulled 2 images by each of the staff that had been there for a long time. There were 5 of us that have been there a very long time. And then he pairs them together not necessarily together, but the 10 images are then spread on this level of the museum where our offices are. And he also includes some of his own work in this space as well. I'm just going to pick one pairing. This is 2 different staff members that he also then brings these together, again based on his own experience. Karen Irvine is picked the image on the left here. Karen studied here with Stefan, who's in the audience. And has been a curator at the museum for over 10 years and has done a lot of work with Czech photography at the museum. And this is paired with the head of education, one of her picks. One of the things that Jan discovered in our collection was we have hundreds of Polaroids by Andy Warhol that were donated to us by the Warhol Foundation. And he makes almost like a flip book of all the Polaroids. So it's his own work of scanning these Polaroids, turning the fashion models back into almost moving for the camera, and it's very playful, a very playful piece with 3 of the Polaroid strips. These are stills from that. This is also work by Barbara Crane, where he reinterprets the work of Barbara Crane's work within the collection. He also discovered that we have about 500 of Dorothea Lange's work prints, again for a very bizarre reason that Dorothea Lange's stepdaughter lived in Chicago and had access to many of her prints that she donated to the collection in the 1980s. And it's really remarkable to have this many prints, as we're able to really show her way of thinking, of taking an image, cropping it, changing it, zooming in, and the different interpretations. He really utilizes our space and collected these groupings of images and hung them in the space of how Dorothea Lange works through some of her photographs. From mostly all, these ones are all taken from 1934 to 1938, I think. These photographs, speaking of Aura, have all of her markings and crop marks and all of the notes on the back of each photograph too, which is really remarkable for being a study collection as part of a university. And these are one of our most heavily studied photographs that we have there. He also discovered that we have this large project called Changing Chicago that in the 1980s were commissioned 33 photographers to photograph Chicago. And because he's now living in Chicago, he then launched his own work based on it, where he made 7 videos of his interpretation of where Chicago is today, based on this project of where Chicago was in 1987 when this project was commissioned. He chose to hang 7 works by each of the photographers, clustered around the space. And then you can see where there's these video works that are combined in there. This is our viewing area. Behind those easels is where our permanent collection is, and this is where we pull our collection to show. So he liked that it was where we have this bombardment of images, where people often sit and look at images for a very long time. Much of the work is time-based. I'm going to end there, because I could go on forever, but I think I'm up on time. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Natasha. It would be also very interesting to see what Jan Tichy really does apart from the Museum of Contemporary Photography, but maybe that's an issue for some of the next forum. The next speaker is Eva Eicker. The title of her contribution is Title and Theme, Reappearance of Materiality in Recent Photography. Eva is based in London. After a year of freelance work in Berlin in 2011 and 12. Eva Eicker works as an exhibition assistant at the Photographers Gallery, and since completing her postdoctoral studies in cultural anthropology, which was in 2006 at Ludwig Maximilian University in Munich, as well as a Master of Art in Photography and Urban Culture at Goldsmith College in London in 2009, she focuses on social and cultural issues of critical engagement with contemporary photography. So Eva, now we have time.
Thank you very much. In the context of this panel and the second panel, photography as an original and the issues around the photo and the photographic image, and also in the context what we've heard so far of institutions and photojournalistic works and editorial works as well. I want to focus on art, photography, and also stress this art point of view a little bit, and how the photograph is actually used in not only current photography but also in the past so far. So photography is one of the youngest mediums to enter art, and for a long time was not really considered as such due to functionality and technical purposes. This changed in the last 30 years due to mass proliferation in museums, galleries, and also curatorial works, but also art fairs and the creation of an art market as such. But also, and that's one of my main focuses, it's due to the fact of how artists used, integrated, and explored the medium in their works. There's not sufficient time to explore all aspects around the materiality and the history of the technical processing, but instead I will give a few examples of artists and their artistic and technical choices that emerged in the last 30 years, but also mainly most recently. Things became very easy, as we've heard before, a very loaded word, obviously, but with the advent of digital photography and the current situation of imagery through the print, mobile phones, the internet, and it seems this has resulted in a very renewed interest in the physical and tactile quality of a photograph. Could I get the first slide, please? So in the context of this panel, I will ask, why is that? And before answering or trying to answer it, I will make a few points on historic material appearances. So if we look back from the heliograph, the daguerreotype, the ferrotype, as we can see in the next slide, please, photography was always dependent on its chemical and material constitution. So there were very distinct characteristics of the usage and also of how they were used in the end. Early photographs were specific in what they chose to depict and determined by special needs and technical improvement, as well as the communication and the distribution. If I could get the next one, yeah. So manipulated by hand or physically exchanged, the image combines a function and act of representation with a history that constructs how the image is communicated. So basically my main points here are, firstly, photography as an original, as a singular medium, so in contrast to the multiple, what we have nowadays with the digital. But also, secondly, photography and printing was a very painstaking process, as we can see here in the Kodak ad from 1888, where George Eastman claims, "You press the button, we do the rest." So until here, we can suggest it always has been about materiality and objecthood in those times. Therefore, materiality is nothing new to photography, so it was early pictorialism, for example, and also abstraction, and the intention of establishing photography as an art to reject that mechanical and that very automated development and feature the manipulation by hand and to achieve some kind of status of art or distinction. This denial of technical now, is it a return to art again? We might as well ask. Recent exhibitions have foregrounded this material turn, as we could have seen 2 years ago at the Michael Hoppen and Saatchi collaboration with the show Starting with a Photograph. Then also the Photographers Gallery 2 years ago was testing the limits of the material and reflected on this objecthood. And most recently, last year, the Victoria and Albert Museum in London had a show on camera-less photograms and how they used lights, water effects, and sort of destruction to make images. And the show was called Shadow Catches. So far, it could be argued that the concern for the processing and the materiality never really went away. Obviously, it was always there, but it was then transformed. So previous experimenting with abstraction offered by all the technical criteria can be understood as a critique of photographic representation, but that looked forward to the concerns of postmodernism and retained a resolute commitment to the medium itself. The next slide, please. So in the 1970s, an understanding of photography as a hand-dependent printmaking process was central to a certain group of artists and their persistence to the so-called, the persistence of the so-called alternative methods. Artists such as Betty Hahn, as we can see here, and in the next slide as well, and Barbara Kasten, which is the next slide. Thank you. They were working with alternative photographic processes, mainly used as a counter-movement towards the emergence of color and also codification during those years. Examples of rather antiquarian forms of analog photography would be Sally Mann's use of wet colorition and Chuck Close's reappearance of the daguerreotype in his works. Adam Fuss is one artist working with photograms amongst others, but it's not to me to say to what degree they are concerned with a certain resistance of the digital dominance, but it should also not be confused with other artists who had a more conceptual approach to it, like John Hilliard, for example, in the next slide, who basically photographed taking a photo. So there is a depiction of the process of photography and also understood in a very self-reflective practice. Moving on in time and space, so to say, the more recent and less conceptual but more sculptural approaches are artists like Katherine Kastner, who is an English photographer in the next slide. You can see it there. She has an ongoing series called Damage, where she burns and scrapes the transparencies she took of urban scenes and combines, therefore, the subject matter with the destruction. She would, for example, cycle around with a transparency attached to her bike or something like this. So this destructive action of burning and scraping is more or less resulting in an image that is influenced by the process and in a very curled and materialistic form, therefore. The next one, that's her again, that's a different image. In the next slide we see Walid Beshti, also an English artist. He uses photographs as a material form and explores the distinction between the physical and the image world. So his work is basically, he folds, creases, rolls photographic paper through a variety of processes, and then therefore creates images which are abstract but also in material form and in the context. So his pictures more or less tell the story of the actual making. In the next slide we see Wolfgang Tillmans, a German very famous artist, photographer. He increasingly abstracted his photographs from casual everyday scenes to large color field photographies. And in his series Lighter, he physically folds and seizes, and also seen in the next slide, the photographic paper, and therefore makes these sculptures, these very simple, beautiful photographic sculptures. He himself says, like a photograph that no longer represents the works as it is supposed to be, but that it is asserting itself as an independent object. Then there's also in the next slide we can see the Italian artist Maurizio Anseri, who works with found images, found photographs. So he collects old portraits and then he creates these dark psychological collages and draws attention to the photograph's surface by stitching through it and making another layer of craft making, more or less. And also interesting, in the next one we can see that as well, thank you, the nostalgia, which is first of all in this found image, but then also further highlighted by this kind of embroidery, which also could preserve the original, you might say. A French artist called Aliki Brain, in the next, thank you, she did a series of black landscapes, and she's interested in how a photograph can be transformed into an object using destructive methods and techniques, whereby she physically cuts hole in the medium format negative with a hole puncher and therefore allows light from the enlarger flood through it, and then therefore we as a viewer see black holes, which enables her to make a mark on the photographic canvas first of all, but also forces the viewer to look towards the mechanical process, but also the texture of photographic paper. In the next slide, we see the American photographer Jim Goldberg, who works mainly documentary, but then also he works with Polaroids, video stills, found images. So he stretches that kind of category a little bit into the art world. And in his series from 2006, Open Seas, he had also his subjects write sort of fragmented narrative text of their feelings or whatever they saw in the image about themselves, and also seen in the next image. So he manually interferes through the collages and combines various Polaroids or found images. A very interesting artist, I think, is Stephen Gill, who's also English. He incorporates found images in his photographs, which he locally finds in the area of Hackney, which is a borough in London, and then presses them in his studio and then rephotographs his own images with these artifacts alongside his own photographs. So that's a series of Hackney Flowers. In the next two slides we see his most recent series, Outside, where he's dropping local plants or false eyelashes into the camera, creating these surreal montages while actually taking the picture. So instead of working with the print after taking the picture or reworking with it, he integrates this in his making process already. The objects introduced to the camera chamber are therefore part of the image, and he himself says, I've sort of regarded them as in-camera photograms, which is quite interesting. The last artist I want to show to you is Marietta Girulescu. She actually, she combines these topics of digital and analog that we are debating here today in her works, where she finds photographs, then scans them and leaves the lid open, which leads then to sort of the curling paper, which obviously changes the laser light hitting the image. That's why we can see the rainbow just in there. And also she would not clean, for example, the glass of the scanner. Therefore, she's very concerned with that sort of depth and flatness, as well as the analog technologies and these mechanics around both new and old, so to say. Finally, we could also then ask not only what is the photograph, but also when does the photograph stop being a photograph? Who needs or why should we even make this distinction clear, and why isn't the photograph an object in the first place anyways? So it has been a big confusion with the fact that it's a proof of reality, which is an old and overexposed debate. Away from the materiality and closer to what we see, which also I think fits to what you've said earlier about the aura of photographs. Still, I don't think the reappearance of materiality is to be explained solely with that kind of nostalgia or the longing for authentic photography. I think it poses much more complex and different questions which we can't answer here today, but one of them would be the tension between the image and the object. And I think, in my eyes, interesting questions for the panel could also be, at one point, does the photograph stop being descriptive? When does the paper become more than just the support for the image? And how does paperless photography change our perception? So I think the role of the new media has generated new reflections on how we might experience and understand art and photography, materiality, mediums, technology development, and recognize our desire to consume photographs through still both vision and touch in a way. So, thank you.
Thank you, Eva. I think that your paper presentation really has questions a lot of myths about photography and its reproducibility and lack of aura and immateriality, to which I hope we will be able to come later. The next speaker is Katherine Kastner, who is a gallerist, co-founder and co-owner, together with Kamel Hunt, of the Hunt Kastner Private Gallery of Contemporary Art in Prague, which was established in 2005. The gallery focuses on the presentation of prominent artists of the younger generation working in various fields of the visual arts, including photography. Apart from its regular exhibition program in Prague, Hunt Kastner Gallery actively participates in major art fairs, as well as organizing exhibitions of Czech artists abroad. Apart from managing Hunt Kastner Artworks, Katherine lectures in curatorial studies and photography at the Faculty of Art and Design at Jan Evangelista Purkyně University in Ústí nad Labem, together with Pavel Baňka. So, Katherine, welcome.
Hi, thank you very much for inviting me today. I was sort of, I guess, a last-minute sort of addition because Pavel Baňka and the organizers of the Photograph Festival thought that it would be important to sort of add a point of view about the market in photography in the discussion. And I'm going to say right off the bat is that I'm not an expert in photography. I work with artists who work in the medium of photography, and in fact, I wrote in the little sort of description, as I said, when I looked at our exhibition history over the past 7 years, I realized that over half of our exhibitions, in fact, included photography as an important medium in the exhibition. But we are not a photography gallery. We don't only work with artists from one medium. As I said, we're 7 years old. We work with 12 artists who live and work in the Czech Republic, and from a variety of mediums. And we don't really, one of the things I'm going to say right now is I don't know if I can add any sort of really deep insight into the market on photography, because I don't really look at photography as necessarily a completely different medium compared to other artists I work with. I mean, obviously it is, but we don't sort of say that photography has a specific, I mean, it does have a specific market, or that a painting, or that video, or that they tend to be, for us, what we're really looking at artists are what they're doing and if it's interesting. If it happens to be in the medium of photography, or if it happens to be in video, or it happens to be in painting, or it happens to be in some sort of multimedia. Coming from the Czech Republic, however, when we go abroad, the Czech Republic is known for its photography, it's known for its tradition, it's known for its strong photographers. So we often get approached and say, we're showing some artists, and they say, oh, you're a photography gallery. And we say, no, we're not. And maybe a little defensively, and I don't know why, I can't really explain that, but we like to sort of like think that photography, like other mediums, really is sort of on the same level of the art perspective. But artists we work with are generally a younger generation working with, I guess you consider emerging artists, or sort of mid-career now, some are going up into it. And we show them on two, it's also important to talk about is we're talking about sort of two different markets, I haven't said anything about what the market is like, but we look at for two different markets for us is really important. One is a local market, one is a Czech market. We're here in the Czech Republic, we're a Czech gallery, a commercial gallery, we're trying to sell to Czech collectors. This is an emerging market. This is in a market that for contemporary art is still very much in development. And then we have the international market, and that's when we go to the art fairs. That's when we go to Perry Photos, you see a picture up here, when we go to Art Basel, when we go to Frieze, when we go to the art fairs internationally. And from the very beginning, we decided that because this is an emerging market and there's not really a whole lot of demand for contemporary art, especially the younger artists, from a commercial gallery, that we would have to go internationally. And so that's what we did. We started to do the art fairs, because what else? You know, that's the perfect platform for trying to get your work out and get it shown on an international basis. This is from Art Brussels. This is a solo show we did this year with works by Jirka Tin. And I'm sorry, I'm going to jump around and say the images that you see up here are just kind of, they have no specific order. They're just sort of like different photography-based works from artists that we work with or we have shown, just to sort of show you the wide spectrum of photography-based images that we show. But from the international market, we do actually sell quite a lot of photography-based medium. In fact, you know, when I look back on it and I thought about it, but I wouldn't say that the collectors are that interested or that focused, and more interested on the quality of the work, on the artist, where the artist is in their career and what they're making. Maybe you could say they're more interested conceptually in the work. They're obviously also in the quality of the work, but I wouldn't say that we get that many collectors who are very, very interested in terms of, say, how the process and the actual process. We are interested in the process, and we try and find out from the artist about the process, but I would even say even the artists that we work with aren't necessarily so forthcoming about how the works are made. We almost have to drag it out of them. Before we go off to art fair, for instance, we'll go and we'll say, okay, how did you make this? How was this? And you know, they tend to be sometimes even fuzzy on the issues, because for them, as I said, it's not necessarily for them, it's not about the photography, how it's made, but it is about the actual final work. And we find that, in fact, with the collectors, this is also the same, is that from time to time, we'll get a collector that comes in and they'll be really focused on how it was made and this, but that happens in the other mediums as well. That happens just as much as sculpture, installation, what have you. And in fact, it's not a really huge issue, but again, we're dealing with contemporary art. We're not dealing with secondary market at all. We're not dealing with vintage prints. We're not dealing with artists who aren't living anymore. So as I said, it's very contemporary art photography, I think, is a little bit of a different field and has a little bit of a different focus in terms of collectors. On the local market in the Czech Republic, I would say, at least for us, and this is sort of very individual, we don't have a huge market for photography here. I mean, surprisingly, you would think that here in the Czech Republic, with the quality and of Czech artists, contemporary artists who are working with photography, you would think that we'd be selling a lot of photography, and in fact, we're not. And I found that very surprising, and still do, because I think it's an emerging market. There's collectors who are starting to be interested in contemporary art. They're starting to have money, but there is some hesitation to go into photography. And this is maybe more from an idea of like how many editions, from the fact that it's easily reproducible, that they're afraid that somebody else might have the same image and they want a unique image. It's interestingly enough, here on the local platform, it's more based on that sort of idea. And they new collectors tend to want something which is really unique. And they tend to gravitate towards, therefore, painting, because they feel that that's just about as unique as you can get. And I find that actually kind of surprising, because I find photography a very good medium for people who are starting to collect. You know, I think that if you really want to start a contemporary art collection and you don't have a lot of knowledge and you're just sort of like getting your feet wet, and also price-wise, quite frankly, that photography is a really good place to start. And here again in the Czech Republic, because we have such great quality artists. But surprisingly enough, I said in the Czech Republic, and again, this is specifically from our viewpoint, we're a commercial gallery. I'm not saying that photography isn't selling or that people aren't collecting it here, but they're not collecting it from private galleries such as ours. Is that they're either doing it on their own, they're already experts, or they're corporate collections maybe who are already, you know, buying directly from the artist or things like that. So surprisingly, as I said, and sort of I hope that changes, but contemporary photography here in the Czech Republic for us is not something that you know, we sell a lot of. People come in and they want to buy paintings. This is a piece by Eva Eicker, by the way. I was saying that most of our artists work with photography. This is a picture of her with collage on top. And I said, and this is just again to show you sort of like the different sort of spectrum of artists that we work with who use photography in their work. This is an image of an exhibition in our gallery of Alena Pachmanová, who did an exhibition together with Alenka Vitkova. And Alenka Vitkova combined snippets of text together with Alena's photographs to sort of create a narrative. This is a work by Misha Telenova from Ústí nad Labem. It's actually part of the Photograph Festival program. These are photographs of words written on a piece of paper, and they're installed in the vitrine windows in Prague 2 of the Prague 2 City, I guess, Council. Here you can see, here it is installed. This is part of the Photograph Festival, so any of you who've been around, or if you haven't been around, you can go see this. Misha works with digital photography, but again, as I said, I don't really think in this sort of work that's necessarily... This work is actually by Daniel Pittin. He's an artist that you might call, you know, a painter, but you also might have seen this work in the exhibition at Rudolfinum called Mutating Medium, curated by Pavel Vanšat, and it's found digital images. It's called Diary. It's found digital images with writings that create sort of a diary, a fictitious diary. For instance, with something like this, Daniel Pittin, as I said, we have much more success in selling his paintings than in selling a work like this here in the Czech Republic. I suppose not surprisingly. This is a work by Jan Šarík. Jan Šarík is also, I guess, a painter, video artist. These are 8 sea prints, and it's called Missing Number. He works with coding. This is a work by Jiří Skala that he, I guess, called Two Objects of, what is it? 2 objects from where he photographed, or he had his parents and colleagues of his parents photograph large machinery from a Škoda Pilsen plant that they had bought from the plant when it went bankrupt. That was a piece, that was a machine that his mother got on her 50th birthday from her husband. And this is sort of a comment on social transformation in the Czech Republic. This is work by Jirka Tin. It's a photograph. It's pasted on the wall, abstract from basic studies. It looks, he's looking into trying to create photography in the same way that you create a painting, in terms of looking at color and looking at form and putting it together. This is another work from the Photograph Festival, also from Jirka Tin, also from the Basic Studies Non-Narrative Photography series. It's in the Botanical Gardens in the tropical greenhouse. It's another work by Jirka Tin. This is a photogram where he calls light drawing. Again, he's trying to draw, he's trying to use photography in the same way that you would draw an abstract picture. Another work by Jirka Tin is just a black and white photograph with red lights showing on it, and it's called Portrait in Red. And this is a view of what we showed at Art Statements, I think about 4 years ago, of Eva Kochatkova in her work Controlled Memory Loss. And we're back to Periphoto. So as I said, you can see that we work with a wide spectrum of artists who work with photography. And I said, I really think of the 12 artists we work with, I don't know that there isn't one that hasn't used the photographic medium at some point in their work. And my feeling really is that photography has sort of come onto its own in terms of, and this is, I said, this is a very personal and subjective viewpoint, but I don't really look at photography as something being sort of like on the side, as sort of being something completely different. And while it might, as I said, you have the market-wise, you might say, well, in the Czech Republic, they're not collecting because they still see that. But I think that's obvious. That's something that you see that's characteristic of an emerging market. As I said, they obviously start with sort of what they think are blue chip. They start with the moderns, and then they go on to painting, and then they'll move on to photography, and then they'll move on to installation and maybe video, and then, we'll go on to the conceptual art. But for us specifically, as I said, I see photography as an incredibly flexible medium that's really being adopted by many, many artists, and is, as I said, has sort of like grown up, and it hasn't. I don't really see such a great difference, quite frankly. I don't see the issue of editions being such. When you're talking about anything, you're talking about editions. We work with a lot of artists who work outside of the field of photography that have editions. And I think, as I said, I don't really find that the collectors are that focused on whether it's analog or whether it's digital or whether it's a lambda print or whether it's on Kodak paper, it's on Fuji paper. I'm sure there are those collectors, and we're just maybe not in that because we're working with the younger emerging artists. We're just not in that up there, working with the people who are. But as I said, in our experience, it really just hasn't been such a great issue. It's just about the quality of the work. That's the most important thing.
Thank you, Katherine. And we're slowly but surely going to the end, and I would like to ask the last speaker, who is Anne-Françoise Le Suisse. I don't know if I'm pronouncing her name correctly, sorry if not. She is based in Liège, has a PhD in cinema and audiovisual arts studies from the University of Liège in Belgium. Since 2007, she has curated exhibitions for the Centre Culturel de Liège, and she has also been the artistic director of the International Biennial of Photography and Visual Arts of Liège since 2010. And Anne-Françoise, the title of her presentation is Photography as a Way of Thinking. So let's think of photography.
Okay, hello everybody. I'm the last one. Be brave. It's been a very dense afternoon. I'll do a few talks, and then we'll come to the image very soon. First of all, I would like to thank the organizers and the Czech Center in Brussels, and Kristina Prunerova for this invitation. So my intervention today is in line with my work as a curator. I don't speak here as a photographer, a collector or a publisher. Indeed, I think that these positions raise other questions and thought than the ones I'm going to develop. My relation to photography as a curator is the one of a person who searches to display pictures as formal object of sense. The question of whether a picture is a copy or a vintage print, whether it is digital or analog, whether it has been spread on paper or internet, these questions don't prevail in the first place. What is important in the way I relate to photography is the fact that photography is a form. If I try, okay, you can just put Patricia Kiesertif and let it full screen. It's okay for the moment. Okay, so photography is a form. If I try to define simply this notion of form, I would say that it's a way of visualizing the world. It's the visual power of an artifact, each time singular, that rereads the world, that sees it and conveys it newly. Whatever the technique used to create or spread image, photography always proposes a unique way of representation, which has no equivalent in other fields, because it is a still image, and because it permits to perceive and to interpret stillness of time, may it be long or short. Amongst the discourses that have had a long influence in the field of photography lies the idea of photography as evidence, photography as a document of truth, lies in the initial discovery of the photochemistry of a material that can retain the light and by way of consequence the aspect of the external world. This discovery has opened a totally new visual representation of society and times. From this point, photography has been thought as if it possesses an unequivocal mechanical relationship to reality. It is the genuine mark of an evidence of an event. To memory also, photography freezes a unique moment of time that cannot be repeated, and also to the co-presence of the photographer as an eye to the event he captures. Photography still bears the scars of this discourse, and when it comes to compare and define supposedly new forms of photography, in particular since the digital age, we usually refer to this ontological, essential definition of photography. If you see almost nothing, it's perfectly normal. This initial aspect of photography, its link to reality, unicity, and evidence, that gives a specificity to the medium in comparison with painting in the first place, of course. But what is often forgotten is that the components of this initial definition have quickly been questioned by other uses and practices of photography since the end of the 19th century and the very beginning of the 20th, well before the invention of digital photography and its trail of daubs. I'm referring, for example, to the various practices of photomontage. We heard about this photomontage or the installation of the Soviet avant-garde in the afternoon, or to the pictorialist movement also. These examples, they do not revoke the position of photography as evidence and trace, but they open it considerably and bring a total different light on this idea of photography as truthful memory on the essential co-presence of the photographer with his object, and as a proof of reality. In fact, in its history, photography quickly became something else than strictly a document. It became quickly something very much heterogeneous. No more light because the image needs to be almost in black. Above all, it became a new way of questioning the representation of humanity, society, and time. My hypothesis here is that despite the huge technical upheavals that photography has encountered, and contrary to the discourse that enhances a fundamental difference between analog and digital, photography as a form of representation hasn't changed radically and continues to explore exactly the same problematics than before. Photography remains, through time, a still image. It is maybe the only thing everyone can agree on. Therefore, rather than trying to define a new photography by measuring what's left from the old criteria, wouldn't it be better to try to understand how the artists from today continue to rely on the still image to explore the limits of representation through the forms of stillness of time? So now I would like to give you a few examples, a few contemporary examples of these new ways of exploring old questions by presenting some artists who have been shown at the Biennial of Photography of Liège recently. Many other examples could have been presented. This one would illustrate very modestly my position. So first of all, Patricia Kayser, this almost no image. Patricia Kayser has been trained as a sculptor first, and now she works on photographic installation. The installation here is composed by 3 portraits. There is one. I don't know if you can see something. No, because maybe you can, yes, just put the black, all black here. Photography is here almost erased, and by way of consequence, these pictures arise out of the photographies as evidence of the past, and at the same time, they contain the subjectivity of a vanishing memory, and both coexist in this blinding whiteness. Could you please open another file? No. You can maybe go to the second image, Mamak, you see, just to see the installation once the 3 pictures are hanged. Just to give you an idea of course, when you are in front of these pictures, you can really see appearing through the white the silhouette of these three persons. So I would like now to open the Lara file, and yes, Lara, and you can just show the images slowly. Lara Gasparotto is my second example. She's a young photographer from Liège. She is, I think, quite representative. I'm sorry, but I need a little bit of light because I really can't read the text in blackness. I'm really sorry. I'm really sorry, just for the white pictures, it was better in black, but... So, thank you. That's perfect, thank you. So Lara is a young photographer from Liège. She's, I think, quite representative of a rather new creative dynamics where freedom and inhibition prevail. taken daily without great attention to technical mastery, to the documentary object, or to giving birth to a coherent series. The pictures of Lara are posted regularly on her blog, and everyone can follow almost in real time her photographic work and her life. Indeed, both are intimately linked. The one belongs to the other and vice versa. On her blog, each image has its own autonomy, but there are new ones appearing all the time, and they testify of a diversity of style. There are influences from fashion photography, snapshots, or amateur photography. Some are taken in black and white, some are colors, some are analog, some are digitals, and some are even taken with out-of-date films. These pictures remind us, of course, of photography as memory or traces of what happened. But here, in this wild way of being taken and spread through the net, the question of truth is less central than the question of a living flow constantly renewed, which is here shared with the world, and on which the world can react through commentary or sharing on another blog. The still image here is a stop in a continuous movement, the movement of life itself. These images are at the same time strong and command. They have a power and they are banal. They bear witness of an event, but above all, they are instantaneous marks of steps in a continuity, and they are made of short stops immediately delivered in continuous time through internet. Lara starts now to be known, and she appears in many exhibitions. You can find her image in the last FOMU TIFF magazine, just here in the bookshop. I discovered it. She just published a book, but she remains faithful to the first way of showing her image through her Tumblr blog. Okay, maybe we can go to the JSON file. Yeah. Please show the first 6 and 7, if possible, first, or one only. Okay, just to show the installation view first. So Jason Lazarus is American. His work is based on another rather new practice in contemporary photography, found images. He's working on a project begun in 2010 and entitled Too Hard to Keep. And Jason's suggestion is simple and yet great: to collect photographs that are too difficult to keep, that the owners cannot bring themselves to keep nor throw away. Jason Lazarus has limited himself to being a trustee of consignment that he keeps strictly anonymous. He's the final destination of orphan images, each with an intense meaning for those who have decided to be rid of them. He collects, he sorts, organizes, and presents the pictures. As you can see in this installation, he presents the pictures according to strict rules, as each person may choose whether or not to accept that their photo be shown. If the answer is no, the photo will be turned facing the wall, and the visitor to this affective archive will see only the paper back of the photo. Now we can start looking at some of these archives. So if you go back to the file, okay, so from 1 to 5, please. Thank you. In this project, each photography has a very deep emotional weight, but it comes to Jason Lazarus to stage these emotions, these painful memories, this multiple that has been, to quote Barthes. The real photographer of each of these pictures has vanished. What remains is the artist, Jason Lazarus himself, who collects these images. The co-presence of the photographer and what he captures is here transformed, as it is in the case of also of Erik Kessel's collection of found images. The eye who takes the pictures should be now understood literally and no more in the photographic sense of the term. The eye here is the one who finds and arranges a set of already existing pictures to make them visible again in another way. The co-presence is not in the shooting process anymore, but in the selection of pre-existing visual material. The photographer, the photographer who doesn't take picture anymore, but only select, collect, and arrange them, is the consequence of the world render visual in almost every of its parts, thanks partly to these technologies of communication. So it is thus, in my sense, not so much a radically new position than an evolution of the sense of seeing, an evolution of the meaning of the verb to see or to look at. Okay, I don't know. I have no idea of how much time.
Good to maybe to
Okay, I'll show just my last example. Thank you for going to the Patrick file. Okay, Patrick Van Roy, so my last example is a Belgian photographer too. Maybe you can show Ines and Mathilde, not the first one. Oh yes, this is in installation view too, okay. So in his series Warning, each portrait is composed of 4 different images. 3 portraits of boys, and 1 of girls are interweaved to achieve a new identity. The characters in these pictures are created through morphing technique, and none of them exist. If we take a closer look at the image, you can just stay on this one. If we take a closer look at the image, we can see that each body has a wound, discreet at first sight, but once you have discovered it appears rather serious. These portraits seem perfectly real, but actually they are purely fictional. They are the result of technological manipulation. The purpose of the work is to make us believe the pictures are real on the one hand, and on the other, it notifies us on their artificiality. Together, these 2 apparently paradoxical purposes serve a reflection on death. The power of photography to appeal to reality is here diverted to speak metaphorically of the fragility of being. You can just maybe stay on one portrait, if possible, thank you. Morphing technology serves an artistic aim. Morphing is used to give a visual form to a thought. And this visual form relies on an old belief we still have in photography as evidence, but this belief is necessary. This belief is necessary to the efficiency of work. But in order to fully reach the artistic form wanted by the artist, it is also necessary in the same movement that this belief is perverted, thanks to clear sign of impossibility and artificiality in the image. And every example I gave rely on this double principle. On the one hand, they give an echo to fundamental old definition of photography as evidence, as proof of reality, and on the other hand, at the same time, they give new limits and new developments to these definitions, thanks to the artist. I stop now, and I thank you very much for your attention.
Well, thank you. François was the last speaker, but I can imagine that you all are already tired. We had a long afternoon, but still we have a few minutes for the discussion. So if the speakers from the last panel would not mind to come back up here, I would really appreciate it, and maybe we can start a short discussion. So now it's your turn. You're free to ask whatever question you want. We talked about galleries and selling works of art, including photography. We heard about evidence in photography. We heard about a lot of other things, so please just, you have the last chance. Yes, Selina. Can you wait a minute? Yeah, there's a portable microphone.
And Francois, the pictures that you showed of, I think her name was Laura from Liège, who does the blogs. Are these pictures that she makes every day? Is it like a diary, or are they just edited freely?
In fact, they have no clear status. It's not a diary, since they can be taken daily, or I say daily, but sometimes maybe 2 days and no pictures, and then on one day there are several of these ones.
But she photographs them on the day that she puts them on the internet. Quite rapidly, and there is always new ones. Now the movement has been slowed down because she has a book and so on, but when she was still a student, she opened this blog, and the pictures pictures were falling almost every day.
To somebody else? Yes, Marketa Karol, in the very back.
All right. I have a question for Eva Eicker. I really appreciate your presentation. I was curious to know whether you are having some sort of theory about why, when you are speaking about coming back to materiality of the photographic image, why so many positions are using abstraction. Because when you have been showing the Wolfgang Tillmans or Walide Beshty as someone who is really interested in materiality of the print, so why they are ending up with abstract, if we are having something to say about it?
So your question was if I have a theory on it, or it's difficult because I mean apparently as a fact it is reappearing in photography. I do believe that there is some connection to it, and I obviously also in the times of technology and developments that people question the medium and also take it, stretch it a bit, but I can't say that I have personally a theory to why that is, but I think it's definitely a reaction to it in a way, or not against it, but I think it's you always have to distinguish also between the artists who like Sally Mann, for example. It's a different issue there because they have always used this kind of medium, and she even says herself that she would not work any other way, that she needs this body of work. I would not disagree, but I also do agree to a certain period, because I think in the end the photograph, it has to be a good picture, even though that sounds very random now. I think it's one thing of being open to new technologies, but I personally enjoy more the kind of materialistic element to it.
Marketa? No? Pavel.
I have a question. Thank you. I have a question to Natasha. I really like very much the projection, your lecture, and it's very interesting for us also because we learn about Czech artist whom we didn't know, but because you started with a project made just for your museum, and I was not sure if I understood well how was his former work like. You mentioned working with slide. I'm not sure if he has been always using photography for interpreting, or it was his first project like that. Just to know a bit more.
That would be an hour-long lecture to describe his work.
Very quickly.
Very quickly, he is trained as a photographer. He's most interested in light and uses of light in installation. He often has reinterpreted the history of photography, so he had a very large exhibition video piece that sort of took apart Moholy-Nagy's work most recently. There was a large project. He does a lot of large commission projects and working with communities connected with the project. So we have a sort of infamous housing project in Chicago called Cabrini Green that was sort of a disaster. It was this idea to put poor people into housing all stacked on top of each other, and it caused lots of gang violence, and it turned out to be socially the wrong thing to do. The city for the past 20 years, or maybe 15 years, has been tearing those buildings down. And the last building went down about a year and a half ago, and he did a project where, as they were tearing the building down, he worked with the people who had lived in the building, and as the building was going down, he would illuminate each of the floors and the uniqueness of somebody's bedroom as it was coming down slowly. So he's done very large projects, public-based projects, as well as video installations of working with architecture. He's interested in space and light, architecture, but he's trained as a photographer down in the root, and he teaches photography at the School of the Art Institute now in Chicago. That's the quick and dirty.
Okay, thank you.
For somebody else? I think we should not forget that this very event is organized at the occasion of the 10th anniversary of Fotograf magazine. And if I'm not mistaken, at 7 p.m. tonight is the inauguration or opening of the new issue of Fotograf magazine. And I just have a question back to Pavel. Are you planning to publish the papers that were presented here at the forum in the Fotograf magazine in the future?
We should say it again, I was not sure.
The question is, I mean, you said that the new issue, the upcoming issue of Fotograf magazine will be focused just on photography, reflecting on what photography is as a medium. So my question is, are you planning to publish the presentations, the papers that were presented here today?
The whole time I was thinking, it's great, it's exactly what we need, for the next issue. I was extremely pleased by getting so many, interesting ideas and interesting lectures here, because as I mentioned briefly in my first talk, the issue on photography has changed so much since the famous book of Susan Sontag has been published. And it keeps changing, and also not only theoreticians, not only critics, but artists themselves are still arguing with photography, still quotating medium, and there is so many things which are still going on, and I could really imagine that we can even think about I hope we will have a good record, so we can maybe use some just a short script out of that. But I'm not sure about. I'm sure that I will personally ask some lecturers to collaborate on the issue.
I think it would be a great idea because there were a lot of interesting and stimulating things said here this afternoon. So somebody wants to take the last chance to raise up the hand and ask the last question?
If not, I would love to say that we were very, very happy and very, very lucky that we got such a great people to come and to talk here, such a great lecturers, and thank you all for the participation. And we will continue at 7 o'clock in Školská 28, Školská 28, but foreigners will be brought. So pro Čechy Školská 28, ale bude to naproti Fotograf galerii. Děkujeme, thank you.